nice.
I'm ready for the season, ready for everything. Ready for Alex to finally learn how to light his cigar in one try.
I don't know that we'll ever get through Smokin Theologians.
That's a big flame. We also don't have a lighter this week, so we're using
Looking good
matches.
there. You got it going. You got it smoking.
Great.
Working on it.
You may be wondering why you hear a different voice. Lo and behold, I am not the guest this week, but I am the host. My name is Annie, co-host with Preston. I'm filling in for Alex today because he is actually our special guest. He is our resident expert on our topic. Hope that's not too high of a sell, Alex. Today we're talking about simulation theory and a new topic to me, the metaverse, maybe the impending metaverse.
So, simulation theory, metaverse. Alex, you're the man. You're on. What the hell is metaverse and simulation theory? All I know is it has something to do with the Matrix.
Yeah, in one sentence, go.
In one sentence, yeah. Well, we're living in an age right now where technology is getting to a point where we humans are creating virtual simulated worlds. And now we are kind of, these big companies, Microsoft, Facebook, are getting into this world where they're thinking that the next big wave of the internet is going to be not on the screen, but in our eyes.
Like in our physical experience?
In our physical experience, we're gonna, that sense of presence.
Wait, isn't that just what we're doing right now? Like, I have a sense of physical presence.
But
Actually, it's
like
not
I'm
a
seeing with
physical
my
presence,
eyes.
it's a virtual presence, right?
Well, when I say presence, that's the big buzzword, presence.
Yes,
the
I noticed that in all the blogs you had me listen to.
that you and I could feel like you're here, but you're a hologram right now. You might be in Paris, but the technology is such that it's we can feel that we're together in the same room.
So we are, according to this theory right now, I'm a pixel doll, I'm an avatar, and I'm speaking to an avatar.
If this was a simulated universe right now.
Oh, but we don't know that it isn't. You got to get into the spirit here.
Is it something we
into the
don't know
spirit.
if it
Yeah,
is type
Oh, we
situation?
are
it's time.
in the universe.
Okay, so
The
you
meta
could,
universe. Here we come.
you could be sitting
All right,
here
we're ready. Come on.
talking to each other in real life or talking to each other in a simulated
Hey,
version.
baby.
So you wouldn't have to be here in the owl shop. You could be somewhere
done.
else.
Actually, tell us about what you've got in your hand, because I think you actually made that. This is why he's here, by the way. He's been developing some of his own software and whatnot. You call it software?
Yeah,
That's still what we call it? Okay.
100%. That's what
So
what I
tell
used
us what
to
you
do.
have there that you've built.
So this is the HTC Vive. This is one of the first real consumer-ready virtual reality sets, and the
Wait,
concept
you
is.
didn't make this, did you?
I did not make
Okay.
this.
Well, you said you did something with it. What was that?
For many years, I was knee deep in this world of one of the folks who would like actually create the worlds that you would enter
Okay.
into.
You built the world. You're the architect for this world.
Yeah.
A world.
So in the
world.
Matrix
There's
terms,
many
you're the
worlds.
architect,
Many worlds.
Yeah.
and we are the avatars / Well, he wasn't quite an avatar. There was
Okay.
something else
I
going
guess we
on
should
there.
let him finish
Yeah.
talking
Yeah,
about it.
Go for it.
it's one of those things that you can open up a rabbit hole and you can go all different routes. But at the time, what I was trying to do was essentially understand what you could do with this thing. My background's in film, so I was kind of going into the world of how could you tell a story on this? And one of the big challenges is when you see a film, we take it for granted as movie watchers, but there's things called cuts. When you edit, I'm talking, cut to you talking, cut. With this, there is no cuts. How do you tell a story with this, where it's you and I are in this world together? And yeah, I went pretty deep with this for years. That's what I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life. I got out of it because I felt we were flying a little too close to the sun, and we can talk about that later. But this, I think in history, we're going to look back and this is like this is like a prototype to the Model T. What you're holding right there is actually the Model T.
Can you explain just what you're holding right now for those who are just listening to this?
So this is, it's called the HTC Vive. It's a competitor to Facebook's Oculus. And essentially, you plug this into the computer, and the computer just thinks that it's a second monitor.
But it's basically a screen that you put in front of your eyes and you attach to your
I don't know
head.
if you can see with the camera, there are two little kind of, it's almost like putting on binoculars.
Yeah, like a ski mask. You're
Yeah.
wearing a ski mask and walking around, or not walking around, interacting with the things that you see, but that are not real in front of you.
That's true.
What is reality? Oh boy.
So I know that, we've heard all about the metaverse now through the recent, declaration of what we're going to be doing. Just talk to us a little bit about what the possibilities are. I know that we're at the very early phases of this, but what are some of the possibilities of the metaverse?
Essentially what the metaverse wants to do is replicate every kind of human interaction that we take place in the physical world, down to having a conference call, down to getting a cup of coffee. And the concept is that we are all in this internet, we're all in this world together, and within this world, we all have our own little sphere, we all have our own little land, and we could make that land whatever we want it to be. But we can also visit each other's lands and visit each other's work, and we could enter these worlds together and experience these wild things together.
So is it just more like agency then, and like this instant gratification of being able to create a world without actually having to like put in the blood, sweat, and tears of creating a world in this place you want to have somebody come visit with you? Like, why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this?
Well, it seems to me...
That's a question for you.
Why don't we just live in our world?
Well, what I've been trying to catch up with this, knowing that we're going to talk about it. I mean, it seems like it started out with entertainment.
Right.
There's a sort of entertainment value to it. But clearly what I'm hearing now is we're going into much more of a lifestyle orient, where you can go to the store with your,
Right.
via your avatar, and actually talk to customer service instead of going online with a screen and walking down a whole list of things. Now I walk into the store, I actually engage an agent there or salesperson. They walk me over to something, we look at it together, we talk about it together, and I can decide to buy it or not. I mean, it gets into, I can go out for dates. I can actually start dating someone through the metaverse. I go over to the comedian club is one of the videos that I was watching, and this girl has, she's fabricated herself as an avatar that is her ideal. Some people want to create an avatar that's not what they want to be. Others will create something that's really what they are in the most idyllic sense. And she's getting hit on, literally. She's getting hit on at the club, and
would you see it as like a fluid going in and out of like, sometimes
see it
I
as a
want to be in
dating
this
app?
world, sometimes I want to go in this world, sometimes I want to be in the physical, tangible world, sometimes I'm going to go over here for this purpose, and then I'm going to come back into our like flesh and blood world for this purpose. It's just more options of what to do.
One of the arguments is we're already doing this. Every time we have a Facebook group of like-minded, let's say I'm a cross-country skier. I'm in a group on Facebook with like-minded folks, and maybe we can organize and actually go skiing.
But it's like a supplement to your physical life.
That's not
like your entire
They wouldn't
life.
say they wouldn't say it's a supplement. They would say it's an enhancement.
Okay.
Which is scary language, but we'll talk about that later. But really what this is doing, right now we're 2021 right now, so the last year or two has really shown us this concept of remote working, this concept of remote connection.
Yeah.
Even in our own sphere, I mean, in many ways, you guys, I became on board once you guys realized you needed help with Zoom and that concept of teleconferencing. So it's a lot like, so the people who are behind this, who are forking the money over, they're saying that, hey, we are already doing this. This is just going to be the same, but it's just going to make it better.
So that's a great question. So you could really see it the difference between that and this and Facebook is it's real time. I mean, I and you in this virtual room are actually talking as we talk, you know? So you have that capacity there, but so tell me what's the advantage of the metaverse, say, compared to a Zoom conference call?
Yeah. And are you supposed to be in the metaverse all the time, or just for certain like experiences you decide to go to the metaverse for?
Yeah, but first, why isn't Zoom sufficient? I know it's not. You tell me what the answer would be from your field. Why is Zoom not sufficient?
Okay.
So for when I first started getting into this world, what really was the light bulb moment for me was the sense of presence, but really when you break it down, it really was the sense of depth. When in my early walks with developing these worlds, one of the things that blew my mind was I can create a mountain and look up, and I really felt that was like a big mountain. But when I'm looking at that on a screen,
because it's 3D.
Yes,
It's
and
3D.
that depth. That's something that we can't just poo-poo.
You can't do 3D.
This is 3D right here, right now. I can go to a mountain. I can go to Mount Everest
Yeah,
and
but
see
think
the like
about what it
crazy
takes for you to
mountain.
go to a mountain.
Yeah, that's
I know,
taking
so
off
it's
of work.
instant gratification.
That's
Like-
taking off of work.
Exactly.
That's booking
and you
a plane
lose
ride.
all of that if you just can instantly make a mountain. Or, I don't know, maybe that's not a problem.
But
Think about all the things
Yeah.
you would like to do that either physically you couldn't do. Because
True.
I'm too old to go climb a mountain, probably.
well, I got into
Or at
this.
least I'm not in good enough shape, but maybe not too old.
Yeah, if I may,
But
I
I can
got
climb a mountain and have at least something of the experience of that.
I got into this because at the time I was working with a fella who was mentally and physically handicapped, and he was essentially a quadriplegic, and it broke my heart that this guy could never go to Rome and see the Colosseum.
That's an awesome
That is a very good
he
use
could-
of this.
He could never see these statues, so I was really inspired to help. At the time, I had the pie was in the sky. I thought it was going to be great. I was excited to help folks like him who are physically cannot do these things have these same kind of experiences.
And if you think about it, because what we're really going to get to theologically, and we will get to our theology, is there is a bodily handicap. I mean, we talk about the term handicap or the term physically challenged, whatever the word is, but just having a body, one way to look at it is we are immediately handicapped in certain ways. There's certain, whether it's because it's too expensive for me to go to Hawaii right now, whether it's I'm just not capable of going back in time in history and fighting a dragon, you know, whether it's
That's a good example.
whether it's I
I would
can't
like to
go
do
to
that.
my vision of a future. I mean, the body, the biomass creates
Yes.
all kinds of temporal limitations. So it strikes me there's almost a kind of surreal eternal to what this is searching for.
Yeah,
There's-
and is that an important part of our human experience?
The body.
Well,
and the
something that our
limits.
soul, as a Christian now, if that's what you're wanting to go to, yeah, I am more than a body, but I am a body. I'm also a spirit, and my spirit wants to see my body join it in an eternal life. And that is the gospel. I mean, from Genesis to Revelation, the story is the union of body and spirit for eternity in a utopian society. Is this not yet another version of the billion of gazillion utopia visions that we've had since the beginning of time? It started with Babel,
Right.
but I think I read somewhere, there was a great exhibit in the New York library, public library, it was all the just the Western display of Western utopias. I mean, there's just thousands and thousands of them.
Yeah,
And now we have that human spirit that somehow we all know is longing for the coexistence of body and spirit in perpetuity in a utopian, idyllic world. Is this just yet another utopian
and
enterprise?
the question that crossed my mind is, I don't want to be like heretical, like, is the new heaven the new earth? Possibly. simulated.
Okay, so the
Heaven and earth.
simulation.
Well, we should before okay, because if I may, there are two like roads to go down. There's one is, and I would like to talk about both. Is the concept of what are the ethical dilemmas, if there are any, of creating our own digital universe, our own world, and two, and this is what a lot of folks are. When I talk about this show and what we're doing, over and over again, I get the question: talk about, are we living in a
Are we
simulation?
living in a simulation? And that's
What's
what we
behind
read.
that?
And,
Like, why
a
do
lot
people-
of
and there's some
folks-
significant philosophers who are actually saying probably.
Yeah.
They won't say
Right.
yes, but they're like Malcolm from Oxford.
Sure.
Yeah, he goes through. It's tied to quantum physics now. I think there's a history here, right?
Yeah.
It started with Newtonian physics, and at the very core of Newtonian physics was this idea of materiality, even if at the level of particles. And then from there, I think we went to there's something intermediate before quantum, for virtual, whatever. But then we get into quantum, and now we're into the bits.
Yeah, and
you
the
know,
information.
and
like
information
energy.
and how information is reality and creates reality, which is really interesting because just last night at Compline I read from John's Gospel in this Advent season about how the Word, became flesh and dwelt with us. It's part of the Christian message that there is something about the revelatoriness of God that is also created. That revelation or communication, if you think of revelation as communication, revelation coming from God is in itself a creative event. It creates reality, the revelation that comes from God. It's almost as if we've made simulation. We're thinking of simulation in terms of this information, this communication that makes life, that is actually making life. And the question, though, is even in the Pixar world, is there a physicality to Pixar's? Is Pixar's really? Is there anything that we're dealing with here that is not ultimately material? Even if at the most smallest level that we can't even hardly measure it. And you see, quantum physics deals with probabilities and mathematical equations, and that's where a lot of these philosophers are getting to this whole idea, that there could be a simulation. And we could repeat some of the stuff I read if you want, but I'm hearing there's another side of it saying, well, maybe this simulation really isn't so profound after all. What we're really doing is continuing to discover the creation, and it's just getting smaller and smaller particles, if you will. And but the key thing here is the whole neurological system and the way that they're wanting to connect with the neurological system. So the communication is not by me. They're talking about the capacity in the near future where my brain waves, I won't have to have the matrix thing going in the back of my neck. It's actually going to read my thoughts before I even know my thoughts.
And who's going to control?
And
Like
who's going to
telekinesis.
control that?
And who's going to control whether your thoughts are deemed worthy or not?
Of what?
Of
Or who's going
whatever,
to counsel me?
whatever the program deems
Wait,
appropriate.
Who's going to
So-
counsel me when my thoughts are not
Oh,
deemed
man.
appropriate?
And who deems what? But wait, back to this, the flesh. The Word became flesh, right? As if there is something before the flesh that it's coming from.
Well,
that,
John says in the beginning was the Word. This is before existence.
before physical,
as we
tangible
know
reality.
Creation existence. Before there is the Word.
Yeah.
That pre-existed.
Oh,
and then it
code,
goes,
the Word.
The Word was with God. Listen to in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. Now we're going, what? And then it says, the next verse, and the Word is God. And of course, that's introducing the incarnation of Christ. And that Christ is the Word. Christ is the architect. If you want to put it back in the world of simulation, could it be that the world is just longing for an architect? And is longing to be in such intimacy with that architect and then here we are called what? We're called Imago Dei. I'm the image of God. What's an avatar? An image of the architect.
See, that's the thing that like last night I was going down the rabbit hole on YouTube and speculations and one of these videos I was watching, it was like, this could quite possibly mean that we are actually created.
Yeah.
And I was thinking,
but of course.
I was like, and all of the things that they were reaching conclusions about the possibility that we're living in a simulation we're eerily aligning to the Christian message that we are created beings, that there is a creator.
Could this simulation science really be yet another Copernican revolution that's not anti-God?
Right.
But is actually going. I mean, think about the way the world was pre-Copernican. You know, it was this. The world is the center of the universe. Our Earth is a center, and what else would go with that? And we're the center of the universe basically, and we're flat. Then you had the Copernican revolution, and then, therefore, how did we read Scripture when we did that? We would take what we knew about our world, and we would then read our Bible to read that the sun goes up and the sun goes down. The sun is moving, and not the earth. The earth is static. That was pre-Copernican. Now the world, now post-Copernican, we read the Bible, and we don't read the Bible as saying, we don't see when the sun goes up. That's an anthropomorphism, we call it, where we are imposing the way we see it. Yeah, the sun goes up, the sun goes down. But in reality, we now know that it's the earth that's going round and round, and the sun is static.
And here's the big question.
And we're only one of many solar systems.
Does that revelation matter?
That's where I was going. In other words,
but
and I'm going to say yes and no.
Because the conclusions that these folks who are saying we're living, let me just define what the rhetoric of town is that it's quite possible that we are living in essentially a computer program designed by some ancient, highly advanced civilization, some alien, if you will, for their good pleasure. And what's all crazy about it is how close
and there's a lot of metaphysics in that, not just physics.
Yes.
I said you put purposefulness into that.
Sure.
And that's
how do you define what the purpose exactly? But before I even say that, what's interesting is that they're all kind of deriving to these conclusions that one could argue Christian faith is already kind of argues for. My big problem is that it's trying to do so without calling these creators God.
Yeah.
They're calling them
That's a good way
just
to put it.
Another race.
They've just created yet another God, but one that's somewhat
Themselves.
as we're trying to pretend that it's outside of us, we're actually creating that God.
Yes, yeah.
And the big thing is like
Yeah.
if we can one of the big arguments is that eventually we could, in theory, make the whole universe into this metaverse. We could, the same way that, let's take a step back. I could digitally recreate the owl shop right now, and I can make this into a little sphere of the metaverse. If you were to expand that, and what if you were to able to replicate or carbon copy the entire universe into our digital version of it, who's to say that we ourselves are not a result of such an already a simulation? And my thing is, the reason I say I don't think we're in a computer program, the reason I don't think we're a computer program is two reasons. One, deep down, I just don't think that's right. And I know that's like, there's not a lot of logic there.
Well, the problem you have is it's an impersonal, if it's a computer program,
Yeah.
it still begs for there to be a person that created it and a person that is driving its purpose, that's driving its definitions, its rules. There's a lot of discussion about the rules, you know, in the literature I was reading. What are the rules of the metaverse? And the fact that those rules can be altered, so we have no absolute within this. And so you talk about the owl shop. Who's to say that your owl shop is an authentic owl shop? And it really does comport to the owl shop. You could create the physicality of this owl shop, but could you create this experience and the manner in which this experience is authentic to the owl shop.
Yeah,
the true owl
licensing
shop.
might be an issue.
It also begs the question. I don't want to go into this right now, but it also begs the question of free will. If we're in a computer simulation, what does that mean for free will? But the thing that the flaw I see with all these theories is the assumption that it's so easy to create the universe. Because right now on computer, when you're editing, when you're messing with code, think of a calculator. It's really easy to take the number 50 and times it by 100 million. It's really hard and to see that number on a calculator. So computers are really good at that. They're really good at like adding and multiplying and exponentially growing. But in the physical world, it's not easy to take 100 cups of water and
Right.
and now all of a sudden I have 500 million cups of water. I can do that with a number.
But isn't that even true though with the limitation? Because there was a huge limitation in bandwidth. I don't know if that's what you'd call it in this case, but one of the things I was reading is what was the big breakthrough is that they learned how you could never have enough space, digital space, to create to have the number of pixels that's required to have a 3D simulation that's multiple and all the time. So how did they do it? They limited the key to the virtual reality. Put
The
words in here.
observable area.
It's things that they had to limit the pixels to only what is being used at that moment.
To observe.
So the other reality doesn't exist while this reality is going on.
But for everybody? Like, are we all one?
Here, I got a quote that'll help us here, I think.
That's a good, I mean.
Also, how does this relate to God?
Yeah, let's go back. I mean, because I can answer that real quick. That's the same concept with streaming. So the reason why we go on Netflix and it loads real quick is because we're only seeing a part of that. The way streaming works is it gives us packets of data at a time rather than all of the data. In that same school of thought, and I actually did this when I was knee-deep in developing, I would make it so the only thing I was rendering on the computer was the room that you were in. Imagine if you're in a library and there's corridors of lots of different rooms. The only thing that I would have the computer render is if I'm in this room. If I'm in this room, nothing else exists. But if I then go to that other room, I'm in a new room and then nothing else exists. And in that's kind of what the developers right now are doing to solve the problem of how do you take this giant pool of data and we just don't have the technology to constantly be running about it.
Well, this whole thing is limited by technology, and that's part of the history of this. Here's a quote I think that's getting to something of what we're talking about here. So I'm picking up with one of these philosophers. Says, the history of video game development is all about optimizing limited resources. The whole history of it. If you ask someone in the 80s if you could render a game like World of Warcraft, which is a full three-dimensional or virtual reality game, they would say, no way. It would take all the computing power in the world. We couldn't render all those pixels in real time. And that's when they went to this optimizing technique where, okay, so we're going to limit, the thing about that virtual reality that I have, if I'm going into, say, the virtual or the metaverse version of the owl shop, is all the pixels are focused on that owl shop as I'm using it.
Yeah.
There is no other. There is no.
And last thing I want to say about
there's
this.
There's not a store next door. Is the point?
Here's the question. And this is the thing that drives me crazy. It's like, well, who are you to say that this is not the case? How are we to right now say that Chicago doesn't? We're in New Haven,
right.
Connecticut.
So how do we know it's even there?
How do we know Chicago is not there until we are there?
But that's the key, and they would say until it's observable. So now, what happens when I turn on the video and I'm watching? I'm looking at real-time Chicago. Would they consider that real, or could that be virtual?
Right. And how do other people's perspectives
so I could right now my
influence
iPhone,
yours and
look at a
play a
live
part
picture
of
of
it?
Chicago. But they would, I think what you're saying is they're going to say, but they would ask the question, well, how do you know that's not a virtual that only happens right here where I'm sitting? It's not that there's really a Chicago sitting over there. It's the virtual that's creating the Chicago on my phone.
That's tricky. Like if say there's a camera that you put over in Chicago and then you're watching it from here, but you're not there and you're only observing through a camera. I guess I don't know how that chain of whatever works.
Well, I think people are getting too gung-ho, and this is going back to even the 50s.
Why does it matter?
Let's segue there in a second.
I definitely want to go there.
But in the 50s, maybe not the 50s, but in Lewis's time, C.S. Lewis, there's this idea of observable. You only can. It goes back to doubting Thomas. You only believe what you see. You can only really make any kind of tangible distinction if you can see it with your own eyes. And this idea of a material universe. The question is the universe only the observable universe, what we are allowed to see with our eyes, or is there other things going on?
I mean, I start to get, as I was looking and reading and watching, I mean, it is an intriguing, it's more, when you first started talking about this, brother, I was just humoring you for a while.
I know.
It's like, come on, are you really serious about this? Are you really serious? But when you stop and think, well, okay, it isn't at least an impossibility that there is a virtual, but you really have to take it all the way. Like I said, I could see something on my phone, I could make a phone call, but all of that would all be limited to the experience that's happening right here in my life, observably, or audibly, or whatever it is. It's how do we know for sure that when I get in the plane and fly to Chicago, that plane is virtual and it's optimized in a way that there is no virtual around it. But it's not until I get to the destination virtually that I then see the pixels creating Chicago. This is hard to explain because I've not had to do it very much. I don't preach this stuff very often. I'll put it that way. But I think if we stop and think about it, though, I mean, we're obviously wanting to do some theology here,
we talk about the why. We talk about the why does this matter at all?
But I think part of the why, I think we've addressed at least partially. I do think it's very, it's not surprising that there is a utopianism as part of this movement. That it isn't yet another of many, many, many iterations of utopianism. And we are using the technology. We have no different than the Tower of Babel is using the technology they have. And here's my caution to all Christians. The knee-jerk reaction has always been to protect orthodoxy by slamming progressive development because of the fear of it. I don't want to do that here. I want to say I think we as Christians have more of a responsibility to first of all acknowledge that whatever we're talking about here, from my worldview, it is a creation of God. I mean, we are playing with things, and all this technology is playing with the stuff that God already created, if I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
And so there's a good use for it. There's a good use for it. There's a good use for atomic power. There's a good use for a lot of things, and then there's bad uses of it. I think the first thing we need to make clear is I don't think we should snafu all this stuff. I think there's a lot of brilliance in this movement. I think there's a lot of philosophizing going on in this movement. And I think we want to tame it under the lordship of God rather than reject it as anti-God.
Yeah, like
and
how
if we
are we
tame
going to
it, there's going to be some things that we're going to say are immoral about it. And there are going to be some things that we're going to say that are very moral. Like, I thought that example you just gave with the with someone who's missing some limbs, to actually have a world of limbs that can be enjoyed, and maybe even in a productive manner, to be able to walk through an aisle in a grocery store and pick out foods in a way that I can't do as readily. You see?
Or I can see my cousin from Colorado who I've never seen in 10 years. We can play chess and have that.
Which is like an
have chess not just
life.
in a 2D. You're actually moving and playing,
and it's the nuances of the thing of 3D and the depth is it's the nuances. It's I can see your facial expressions. It's not just I go left, you go right.
Let me ask
you use the word presence over and over. I saw that word showing up when I watched one with the girl who said I was going to do 24 hours of metaverse.
Yes, that one.
And one of the things she described is, but there was a sense of presence there. And I think that is the 3D effect. If not,
Yeah.
and all that comes with that allows me to actually reach out and touch. And I think the brain potentially has the capacity to almost be so close to envisioning that it feels like a touch. I don't know that. I haven't played the games.
Okay, so that's a really good point, because we're sitting here right now being able to be present in this 3D world that we are experiencing. There might be other dimensions beyond us, and that's a whole other thing.
We're in 3D now. When's 5D coming or something?
But the interesting thing is that we aren't even necessarily able to always be present just in our 3D world. Why are we wanting to escape this into like another 3D world, which I can get with the like enhancement and like, yes, that would be fun for an hour to go play chess with my cousin in Colorado.
What happens when it becomes
your entire life? Like, at what point are we
you're just living
sacrificing
in a closed, dark room virtually?
But my other question, which we can get back to the other one, I just want to slide this in here as to like fill out the whole picture
Keep
here.
us back on track. Keep us honest.
Why? I'm not sure this is on track either, but why are we putting all of this energy and effort into creating another world instead of, like, what if all of those resources were being used to like help our world as it is in terms of, I don't know, violence and poverty and
I think some
that.
of it could be. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's clear.
And like in these
but how are you
3D worlds, will there be poverty? Is it just utopia? And why can we
That's a good
work
question.
on our world first before we try to go to another one?
Well, here's the biggest danger.
Unless it's Mars.
There's two major dangers here, I think, theologically. I think utopianism is an age-old. I mean, it's utopianism that tempted Adam and Eve to divorce from God in order to make their own utopia. That's really what was going on there. I mean, I can't emphasize enough, the Bible, you could say, is one long utopian story. And I think this is, the danger is that we confuse virtual reality with true and holistic reality. And so that leads me to the second danger. The big danger is asceticism or Gnosticism. This is, again, old as it can be. You know, there's always been this movement that's anti-flesh. I mean, there's even a Gnostic creation story, and flesh, biomaterial, is evil. The one thing I picked up in this movement, and you can tell me if this is true, is while I see a lot of utopianism in this metaverse, sort of vision, I also see that it's all seems to be about finding a way to get rid, in so many words, of my biomaterial. They see the biomaterial, my flesh, my body, soma in Scripture, as a hindrance to my utopianism. And that's where we as Christians, I think, would have to have a sharp break. I mean, the Bible goes out of its way to describe the earth in very earthy tones and manners. You know, it's from the dust. I mean, that couldn't get more earthy. It's from the dust that humanity is created. And the word nephesh in Hebrew is the word that we often translate soul, but it's actually a word in the Hebrew language. There wasn't really a word that distinguished body from spirit. The nephesh, there is not a word even for body in the way that we use it as all of my stuff. They had a word that described the outward appearance of a person, but it wouldn't have involved the body parts, for instance. It's just the outward appearance. So my point is we believe at the very core of our anthropology that we are a living nephesh, soul. And by soul, I don't mean spirit. The fesh is both body and spirit holistically. It's at the core of our anthropology as a Christian that we are both body and spirit. And Christ, of course, affirms that. Even John, what I was pointing out with John is that John wants to introduce Christ, because some believe he was speaking into some of the Gnostic tendencies, that Christ is the Word, that non-biomaterial that we call spirit. And he came and he became flesh. That very carnal term is used, sarx. He became flesh. and he dwelled among us, presence. So the presence that and then think about when Jesus was raised from the dead, he went out of his way to say, look, touch my hands, touch my body.
So there's something important about our body.
Something very important about our body, thank you. And I think that the metaverse danger is that we lose the importance of our body. We don't take care of our bodies anymore.
Yeah.
We become whatever we become when we don't move around very much.
I was telling Annie, I gained in high school and whatever, I was in great shape.
High school.
I was high school, early
You were a
college.
wrestler, right?
I was wrestling. I was in decent shape.
Your mommy not to get in a fight with you, right?
A lot of afterward, my whole life I've been on computer kind of thing, but especially the last like 5 years, I'd say most of my work is on computer. So I've noticed my physical body. I'm getting a little soft. I'm getting a little, and I have
It happens, brother.
But if I had a avatar of myself, would that even matter? Would it matter that my physical body is deteriorating if my avatar self was thriving? And that's a whole nother crazy. Think about one day.
Well, think about living life and not having the pleasure of actually metastasizing food in your mouth. What would life be? Would we truly be experiencing the fullness of God who created a biomaterial world if I can't eat and drink materially, not just spiritually or digitally?
I also think that there's a good reason why, and I hope this doesn't ruffle feathers, but
Yeah, let's keep going back
I
and
think
forth.
that there's a good reason why I think one day we'll understand that there was a good reason why some folks are physically handicapped, that are physically
we believe
crippled.
every person has a good purpose.
So if we take that out of the equation, I think that in a way we're going away against our original purpose to suffer. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah,
all
that's
this,
a good- that's a great-
all of this metaverse
Yes.
implies no more suffering.
Exactly.
Scripture, suffering,
And that instant gratification all the time.
Romans 5, that we rejoice in our suffering because suffering produces this
Yes.
and this and this. And ultimately, it's suffering that brings us back to the utopian vision of being united to God in eternity. The cross of Jesus Christ
And so-
led to the resurrection.
Some of the most faithful people I know are the folks I know in wheelchairs and have severe medical, physical problems. Those are the most, in my opinion, or at least my experience, those have been the most faithful folks I've seen. If we lose that sense of body, we can go into this metaverse, and you talk about you be you, or
Right.
do me, whatever the word is. Imagine we can be whatever we want in this metaverse, and that's where I draw the line. That's really flying close to the sun. We can really gain the whole digital world and lose our souls in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to use the word nefesh just to make sure what you mean by soul. I think of the soul
Yeah.
as both body and spirit. That's a biblical definition of soul. We use soul often as a synonymous with spirit. But at least in the Hebrew,
Yeah. How would you distinguish them?
I would say we became, God, it says, out of the dust we were made. He breathed his spirit into this dust formed body. And that's when we became. I want you to think, this is very, very important in Christian orthodoxy. When did you become human? We became human only after we were both crafted out of the geomaterial, stuff of earthiness. And then God breathed his spirit into that earth, and we became, it says, I'm quoting now, and Adam became a living nefesh. The soul. The soul gets at the person in the holistic way. One person said there's humanity as we know humanity, and then there's humanity as God sees humanity. We tend to atomize ourselves. We tend to divide ourselves up. I'm an atom. I'm an arm. I'm a this. God sees the whole person. And when he sees the whole person, he calls it the soul. There's examples of that word nefesh in the Hebrew describing a situation where they were putting an animal on a sacrifice, and they put the nefesh, which means the whole animal.
And that's a really important, I'm sorry you interrupt me, that's a really important distinction, because a lot of folks, honestly myself included for a long time, used to think that like a consciousness, that ability to process the world around us, that sense of I, that sense of self.
Yeah.
That's just what you're saying right now, just to clarify, is that that's different than a soul?
No, I am both body and spirit. Therefore, I am a soul. Is how I would use it technically. I know I want to be careful because most people use soul, and again, they immediately think spirit. But at least in the Hebrew use of the term that's being used in Genesis, when we were made, it's the word nefesh. It's the word that is body. It's both. It's not. We were not a nefesh until we had earth and God's spirit together, distinct but never separate. And by the way, how do we do Christology in the 5th century? In the 5th century, they're debating: is Jesus a God? Is Jesus God, a spirit, or is Jesus God, or is Jesus a man, the flesh? And the formula that Chalcedon used was, no, Jesus is both. They are distinct. They're always distinct. Body and spirit are always distinguished, but they're never separated if you're going to be Jesus. Or if you're going to be, and see, Jesus now is the living, this is what makes him so unique. Jesus now is reconstituting humanity in his very incarnation. And then when he dies, he now suffers the temporal death, but then he's raised again where his body, and it's a very important part of Christian theology, that we believe in the bodily resurrection. And we believe in a earthy heaven. Because you got to have a place to walk if you have a body. So you got to have an earthly heaven.
Before we start,
and I'm afraid that this movement wants to lose sight of how precious our body is, and how much that's part of our utopian vision. You see.
And is there consciousness beyond being in a body? I don't know if we can answer that.
Is there consciousness?
Yes, or our spirit, or our soul.
We do believe that when we die,
consciousness only happen if you have a body.
Well, we do believe that there is, because when we die, our spirit goes immediately to the Lord, to be with the Lord, awaiting our reunion with our body in the bodily resurrection.
And we don't really know what that looks like. Spirit goes to be with God.
All I know from Scripture
right?
is that heaven is...
Who knows what that is?
That heaven is earthy. Yeah. Whatever it is, it's earthy. And whatever it is, it's the reunion of humanity to our becoming a living and perfected soul in union with God, living in a utopian world without any of all the nastiness that when we separated from God, the purpose of our lives were lost, the energy of our lives were lost. Remember, he's the energy of our life. That's why we died. We died. We weren't supposed to die.
That's a really important... That's a whole other conversation. That we were not supposed to die. Because the whole Lion King, the circle of life, I don't believe... Annie,
that was a curse.
Annie, I have a question for you.
For me?
For you. 10 years from now.
Oh, gosh.
10 years from 2021, 2031. Would you see yourself... And it's also a question for you. I know what you're going to say.
You know what Preston's going to say?
In a way, Annie, would you go to, say we're in the metaverse, would you go to a worship service in the metaverse?
Oh, I'm not going to the metaverse. Maybe for an hour to go somewhere fun,
You're
like
definitely
an amusement park.
can I just be honest? As much as we want to be cool and hip, and I'm not going to do that. Yeah, we all have smartphones.
For entertainment.
It's going to become so fabricated into our lives that to not go into the metaverse, it's going to be equivalent to be like, I'm just going to be I'm going to be in a caveman in the woods.
Why am I going to go into the metaverse
raising
when
chickens.
I can go outside?
Why would you text me instead of call me?
I prefer calling.
Yeah.
So use a different example.
The irony is, she's our communications director, but I don't know of anybody that probably is
Yeah,
less
you don't like
excited
texting. So
about
embarrassed.
internet and all this stuff, you know?
I guess
It's old school.
My point is, like,
yoga, mindfulness, meditation,
Yeah, that's a great
and
example.
presence.
No,
So
that's
I have
actually
a
a very
very
important-
hard time with like wanting to escape.
So you're talking to a yoga instructor. Now, what would you do? Think about what yoga would not be if it weren't. I mean, in some ways, yoga celebrates the body, right?
Yeah, and you're
That's really what it
using
is.
like physical sensation to be present. I guess
See,
that
this
raises
is
the question:
cool.
can you use other
This is why you're
things
here
to
right
be
now,
present?
right here.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Man. Because I believe in, flow. We know that experience where like you can be playing an instrument, you can be playing a sport or painting or in a conversation or drinking coffee, and you like lose sense of yourself. Like your ego is gone. Time passes. You might like lose hours, which I imagine can happen very easily in like a virtual reality headset where you're like in flow very easily.
You said in flow.
Flow. Yeah.
And flow is a bodily. Isn't something to do with yoga that it's your body and your spirit that is actually working. They're codependent in a certain way. Would you
That's
say
a
it that
good
way?
question. I would say that you're using awareness to be present.
And
So
physical
physical awareness is especially the point of yoga. But what I'm then saying is if you're putting on a headset, going into the metaverse to do something, you are focusing on something very specific, but it's something that is, here's the difference. It's something that is not, and this is depends how you define reality. It's something that is not in reality, really happening flesh and blood here. So you're using your body when you're doing yoga to be present to this moment, to what is real. You're trying to be focused in your mind on a sensation, a movement, like your eyes are looking at something, instead of in your head thinking about the past or thinking about the future. So anytime you go to the past or you go to the future or you go to some mental landscape in your head, you are not present. And I think that's what virtual reality is doing. It's taking you somewhere in your mental landscape that's not present.
See, she's really begging the question of presence. The virtual folks are constant. The virtual folks are talking about, I felt there's a presence. But she's pushing back and saying, but do you have what I'd call nefesh presence?
And I think presence is where God is. Can I
But
say
we
that?
believe that God is present in a sense physically as mediated through the earthiness,
Okay.
even as we
yes.
are spirit. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly.
And that is a
the
sacramental
disconnect here.
sentiment right there. Back to your worship.
Sacraments.
This whole thing this year, that was a big debate in all the churches. Can we partake of the Lord's Supper virtually?
Now I get this.
I believe
was
the
the
Orthodox
consensus
tradition
there?
said no. You know, there is really something sacred about eating together and touching and hugging afterwards and talking. And
Well, what if you
all
were
of
in
that
a
comes
suit?
together.
What if you were in a suit
Oh my gosh.
that
With like sensors and things?
with crazy sensors, and we can feel what we feel when I touch you, and that sense of presence, where it's not just right. The difference between
I think
this.
and what we're trying to do by that is
Yeah.
we're doing yet again, we're injecting an intermediate between God. If you're thinking in sacramental terms, John Calvin said that the Roman Catholic Church was not sacramental enough because it injected between the participant and God a flesh of Rome. There was this, now think about this. So the mystery of sacraments, it is a mystery and it is unexplainable. It's a miracle, we believe, where God in his exalted state in heaven, Jesus in his exalted state, by the Spirit, which we believe is a real person, but spiritual, unites to the participant, the communicant, in a manner that we partake of Christ. The word in the Hebrew, in Peter, is to become partakers of Christ. it's more than just remembering Christ in the sacraments. It's partaking of him in the mystery in which life is given to us. And it's not a magic show. It's not eat and I get life. It's the holisticness of my life, which is framed by the sacraments in a manner that now, without that bodily, because remember, Jesus has a body. His glorified body is enlivened with life and is giving life to our body directly by the Holy Spirit. And my fear would be the avatar is, I don't mean to, get into the Reformation, but in some ways it's yet another Rome. It's become the Canterbury. It's become the epicenter, and there's something that comes between me and this holistic experience.
So you'd be on the side of nay towards having virtual reality communion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we decided this year. Even in the two, now you're saying, but hold it, what happens when it becomes 3D? What happens when you have sensory even?
Yeah,
What
you've
happens
got some gloves you can
when
put
I'm
on,
in a chair
and
like
the wafer
this?
has like,
When I'm in a chair and I have some feeding tube down my
What is the point
throat
of being a
and it
human
gets
being
so
if you're going to sit like
the
that?
distinction between what is the metaverse, that's the thing that we're going towards right now. We're in the Pac-Man days of this, where it's like obvious that that's an avatar.
Yeah.
And do you know that Mark Zuckerberg, I think half of his presentation, he was a 3D. That wasn't him. He was a 3D version of himself. I have to
You're
look it
just
up.
thinking that, okay.
I'm saying that, but I'm like looking at it and I'm
But
like,
look, we're almost there now. We have holographics.
that's not that, dude.
How would you distinguish an avatar from a holograph?
I wish we were in a reality where everything was a hologram versus
I'd say graph.
versus us plugging into, because with the hologram, at least we're still based on Earth. Like, I think if you were hologram right now, if there was like a little device and it like projected you, I feel more close to you than if we were like in some random Hello Kitty rainbow world with you as like the monkey princess.
But still,
I'd like to be a monkey
in the meta
princess.
universe, though, I'm still having to. There's something that is. There's a mechanical contraption that's between me and this reality that I'm living in.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to be the one in like the commune of people who want to be in reality and physically touch each other without a like glove.
You're gonna be in
Alone.
I honestly, I think what's gonna happen, it's gonna be, you think the haves and the haves not right now, that line is gonna soar with folks who are participating and working and making money in the metaverse versus those who are not involved. It's
So
gonna
There's
be
no doubt,
that's
crypto
really
coins. I mean,
it's
we
going
have
to be
it
equivalent
already.
to like
digital money. It's really worth stuff.
It's going to be equivalent to like hunter-gatherers
this
versus like folks who are like
physical
stock
world,
exchange.
Is this physical world going to like fall apart and deteriorate because we have people like in chairs all day in a different world?
Yeah.
Yeah, like what are we doing?
I think so.
But here's the beauty of walking by faith. You're making the point correctly, based on what I've read, and you know it all much better, that, like you said, we're in the Pac-Man stage of metaverse. I mean, the way I've been reading it and the way that, even Mark talked about is, he even said, we haven't even started.
Yeah.
But it's there. We see it. It's coming.
Yeah.
And I do think you're right. It's going to be so much more sophisticated and so much more real. I mean, they were talking about ways in which our brain waves would be able to control this avatar world in ways that we wouldn't even have to be physical. We wouldn't have to do this. We wouldn't have to move something. It would be.
What if you forget you're there? Like a dream within a dream, or like when you're dreaming now, it feels real.
Yeah.
Half the time I'm like, this is real. Sometimes I question in my dream, and I'm just like, no, this is real for sure.
Yeah, but see, this is where I think Scripture continues to transcend all of these utopian movements, all of these succession. I mean, the Scripture was Copernicum before Copernicum was. It was us, the reader, that was fallible, not the Scripture. There's nothing.
Amen.
So I'm saying that.
That virtual world is going to have sin in it.
And so there's a part of this the movement, or whatever we're calling it, the metaverse simulation movement, that we're going to say, well, Jesus was always in that. I mean, that it doesn't necessarily have to be anti-Christ, if I use that term.
Right.
But I think we're going to have from God, from another source, Because at the end of the day, all of this movement is still a movement of creation. I don't care how you parse it, whether it's a computer creation, whether it's pixel communication. I mean, it's all taking stuff that God spoke into existence, and all we're doing is finding more creative ways to use it. That's all we're doing. Yeah.
Right.
And so here's my point. We go to the scripture and we have clear teaching that asceticism is not the way to flourishing. That Gnosticism is not. There's a passage I was going to read in Colossians, if you want me to, where he's actually slamming a movement that's saying, do not touch, do not taste, do not, this, all this fleshly stuff. And he's saying that is not of God. That touch and taste and all that temporal sight is part of our holistic union with God. And so we have these sort of parameters. I think the virtual movement could be a very positive thing up until the point that it diminishes the sanctity of biomaterial body life. But it could enhance it, you see, like you said. I mean, it could be an efficiency issue. It could be a provisional issue. Provision's a good word, like what we did this year in COVID. Thank God for you and the way that we recrafted our whole church. I mean, we were always streaming, our services, but you came in and we created a whole somewhat virtual reality where we would go into our foyer room and we would have conversation with one another. It was so intimate when people are so isolated.
Right.
And I would say that virtual reality is exactly that, virtual. Let's celebrate its virtuosity. Is that a right way to use it? But let's celebrate that as a provisional event.
Interesting.
It's when it becomes it replaces the real event that I think we've lost our way.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, for those people who are shut-ins, this is a godsend. We have people right now participating in our worship in a way they never could have, and they can actually converse with people after it, vis-a-vis the Zoom. That was before they were waiting till Monday or Tuesday for me to bring the sacraments to them in the hospital room. And now they can actually live participate with their congregation, and I'm still going to bring the sacraments to them, but they're still getting a good part of it. That's a good thing.
So what I'm hearing, and what my hope is that, and this is, obviously I'm a Christian, so I hope that there are Christians partaking in this
I do too.
movement, because if not, you think about how you were saying every day we're saturated by what the culture is. We're saturated by, we've never lived in a time where we're constantly being fed information in our minds. Every single day we're getting ding, 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 ding on our phones, or telling, look at this tragedy that just happened in Arizona. Look at this thing that just happened in Japan.
This is going to put that on steroids.
This is gonna. So my hope, my fear, really is that the participants, the people who are making these things, might not have the same biblical worldview that we might have.
Oh, they won't.
And they're gonna.
Sure, many won't, at least.
And talk about brainwashing. There's nothing like strapping into this thing to have your mind go a certain way.
That's exactly what Craig and I were talking. When I told him what we were doing today, Craig is our assistant, our associate pastor. I was saying, go back to the world of Jonathan Edwards over there in Stockbridge or whatever. And I think how it feels so romantically easy to pastor a congregation when the competition for catechesis is a little village, and my access to noise, my access to other worldviews is all contained in the physicality of a small village. You just keep going through modernity and with all these progresses, if you would call it that, and look at what we're dealing with now. I mean, the typical youth in my church or the typical adult in my church, they are being catechized 24/7 in a kind of manner that, like you said, gives me access to worldviews that are not, all ideas are contextualized. Well, we've taken the context out of those ideas, and it's those very contexts that tends to make them become reality. And I can't even imagine I'm going to be dead, but when this world really is full blown, I can't even imagine what it means to pastor a church. How do you compete with that?
Right.
And one person's going to say you compete with it by using the metaverse to catechize. And with that, I'm going to say...
Then we're going into the Trojan horse thing again.
Well, that's right. But I'm going to have to say, I think that's right. At some level, we're doing it right now. We're doing it right now.
With the podcast.
In a way.
Yeah, we're doing it right now. Don't go to church. Well, no, do go to church. I didn't say that. What I mean, though, is for those who may not feel comfortable in church, or just for those who want to supplement church, we're doing a podcast. Well, there's going to be a day, I suspect, when we can go to an alternative alternative event, and we can be there together, interacting with our teacher together in a way that's much more real and much more powerful. Yeah, I think the church will probably need to tame it, but when does it become a Trojan horse, where what really happens is the hidden worldview of the avatar, pixel doll world, when does that start reframing our orthodoxy? And that's what I'm trying to get at. As long as we keep those parameters, that flesh is sacred, and we don't have full communion with God or full communion with one another, or even our life, our earth, without that flesh. And I'm afraid that this movement could steer some in the direction of, and especially there's certain people who have temperaments that would say, it's so much more safe for me to stay home.
Yeah.
Emotionally,
It's safe for me to
physically,
express
safe.
myself. I want to
And
ask
it's
Annie.
escapism. At
Yes.
its finest.
I want to ask
What's going
Annie.
to happen when so many of us are even more down that road of being able to escape just all the time?
Yeah.
Here's a good
And
question.
who's going to be left in charge of this world?
Annie,
Yes.
in the metaverse, what kind of avatar would you have?
Besides that monkey princess you were talking
monkey-
about,
the
rainbow
monkey
princess.
Is this a fun question?
It's a fun question.
What? Let me hear your idea. What would you want your avatar to be if you could make one? Where you can make one, what would you want?
Yeah, I'm
I would
gonna
be
ask Annie.
exactly who I am, but probably not.
Really?
I don't know.
You wouldn't have like a cool little rainbow. I don't know why I keep going back to the rainbow. You wouldn't have like some kind of angel wings or some kind of like funny nose, or you get what I'm saying
Look,
here?
I don't
I would
know.
want to elevate myself. I'd want to be, what's the
I know,
elevating?
like, so I would be like the rainbow princess, probably.
Yeah.
I'd want to
And
fly.
you would be like this majestic.
Yeah, sure. Give me
Being-
like lots of glitter and lots
This
of
glitter.
like sparkles and iridescence and Mickey ears and, you know.
So here's the big concern I have. I have two concerns really. One, the deep concern is that the folks who are architecting this are incredibly secular and incredibly have a certain worldview that I think.
Well, did you see Social Dilemma?
Yes, I did.
All the people who worked on that, and then that like video about like, I can't believe we made this.
Let's talk about
this
Social
thing
Dilemma.
is going to happen again.
We should talk about that in this. My main point is, are we not? Yes, this idea of presence. I can go get a coffee with my cousin in Colorado. That's great. I can go talk to my grandma who's in a wheelchair.
It's provisional, though.
That's
You would rather
provisional.
be in the coffee shop.
But
Hopefully.
that's the best case scenario. The reality I actually seeing happen is. I only say this because the last 3 years of this idea of express yourself, me, everything's self-love. Can we not see a situation where we're kind of going into a hyper on steroids self-lordship?
Ego.
a narcissism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where-
Yes, 100%. Like I said
where-
1,000 times, instant gratification.
Where our capital right now, our clout in the world has nothing to do with how much. It used to be how much money we have. Now it's about how many followers we have.
Oh.
So
Which
imagine,
makes money.
which makes money,
They're tied.
but the influence, right? Influence. I could see a reality where we, the same way on our flesh on flesh, we worship Beyonce, we worship these people
Yeah.
on stage. Could you imagine if Beyonce had her own world? She
I
would
think
become
you're-
cult-like.
Yeah,
It's going to
I
be a
agree.
lot of cults
I
in
agree.
this.
I think it's even more. I mean, already we have personality
Yeah.
pastors who work that very intentionally. You know, just listen to the Mars Hill podcast, and And yeah, I'm afraid of that. It's going to become even more tempting and more possible for narcissism to really do damage in the way it can get into people's lives and have access into people's lives. Or think about that room. You go into a room, and who's to say there's not a predator there?
Right.
And
like
who's to say that they're not getting information that's going to destroy your life? And
Right.
there's a lot of dangers to this. And my biggest fear from a Christian pastor is that it's the presuppositions that I'm mostly worried about in this movement. That, again, starts with the presupposition that flesh is evil, or that flesh is a hindrance. And while it can be in certain ways, we start redefining life. We start redefining utopianism. The Bible is a utopianism, and it defines it for us in a way that directs us to how to find it. I'm afraid people are going to be led astray from what they're made to be by this. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that.
one of the biggest fears or consequences of moving in that direction. It's just, again, that we're further away from...
Well, think about the way the pastoral ministry, again, I'm just thinking of my vocation, but you can do this in yours. The pastorate has been redefined by modern communication. And the pastor who was once, a person that is not just a talking head, but who is sacramentally present in your life, mediating the presence of God in your life through visitations and through baptisms and through prayers with one another, hearing confessions, all these things that are happening. What happens when we use this metaverse to have a congregation that's all over the world, and I don't have any accountability to those people physically at all?
Which they're doing already with streaming.
I know, that's the point. They don't go even stronger.
Yeah.
But it's different that it's not. So we
I
should
now
probably
have a metaverse church. What would that look like, and what dangers does that
So
create?
we should probably wrap this up. My question, my final question for you guys is, what kind of world would you guys make? I want to know you, and then like what kind of if you had all the tools of the metaverse, you made your own little oasis that people can come visit Preston Graham. What would you?
So is this a serious question or a
This is
fun
a serious question because you know what? In 3-4 years, it's going to be a serious question.
Oh, I know it's going to be a serious question, but do you mean I can tell you the one that's a playful universe, or are you talking about me in terms of how I would want to use it for the sake of God or something?
I know. I am in my head answering both of those questions.
I want both. I want to know like your personality, like if
it was all ego-based and I could do whatever I wanted,
Preston,
and there was candy everywhere.
what kind of world would you make? And then
So if
in
you
the
need
context,
entertainment,
yeah.
so I could make room for the metaverse for the sake of entertainment. I could make room for the metaverse for the sake of efficiency. Like, it's a better way to go shopping and getting my groceries maybe. Now my wife would be the first to tell you, if you can't squeeze that fruit, you don't know what you're doing, right? So maybe I'm wrong there, but I think categorically, in categories. Categorically, I can see efficiency. I can see provisional community when it's a stopgap towards the fuller community. I can see entertainment, but entertainment has to be managed carefully, not to control my life. I'm not an economic, economist, but it's conceivable that this digital currency could be useful. I don't know. So I guess I don't want to put my limitations on what we should do with it. I just know that we need to keep going back to the fundamental categories of our orthodoxy that's derived from a revelatory source, because all of this is simply doing what we've been doing forever, which is taking what God gave us, manipulating it, and I mean that in a good way or bad way, manipulating it to be more and more efficient, more and more productive. And if this could be more and more productive for the common good, and that's the key, the Bible says everything we should do should be for the common good and to the glory of God. So if you can show me how this metaverse actually is for the common good, and it doesn't replace God, that's your worry, is the way in which there's a kind of, making God in our image behind all this.
There was a quote I read. It was Imago Dei turning Imago Meta.
There you go. I like that.
Ugh.
Annie, what kind of world would you make?
You're asking what I would make instead of how I would use it and like the things I would visit if I was using it.
I want to know what you would make. Okay, we don't have to put that. We don't have to put that on the record. What?
Because I can more easily say how I would use it and what I might participate in, but I don't want to add to the noise per se. I would rather be making can I say like a real space? I'm just so concerned about the detriment that the physical world is going to experience because people are not caring for it and escaping it all the time.
I think for me, if I were to, pure entertainment now, which means it has to be very modified so as not to distract from the bigger and better things I need to be doing in life. But I think probably the first thing I'd do is I'd go to all the scuba diving locations that I've dreamed of going as a scuba diver. I know now in my life I'm not going to get to go to a lot of places. And I know that I could probably really have a provisional experience seeing the Great Barrier Reef and interacting with what's happening there. I would love to go up into space and go into the other solar systems and just fly around without having to worry about breathing. And it'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot of fun to explore what all this wonderful technology has made available to us in terms of, telescopes and microscopes. I would love to go inside of a.
See, that's you're touching upon. You're both touching.
Yeah, I would like to do that. Let's have a little party.
You're both
with some
touching
friends
upon
on roller
something that's
coasters.
I think really important, and we probably should end here. Is that you're using this as a provisional method to supplement something that happened in the real world, if we may.
Oh, that's true.
That you want to experience that you can't.
And what if my avatar is so microscopic that I can actually do surgery through it? That I can have an avatar, little tiny microscopic person walking through my veins with the
Telling
technology
the robot
attached
what to
to
do.
it that allows me to know how to laser or how to open up that vein and save a person's life. We already are doing that in ways that we couldn't have envisioned. In the way the way I had my prostate cancer dealt with, and microscopic levels they were able to go and kill these cells because of the capacity to get small.
Well, now you're talking in a way. You're talking a little bit. They're doing that right now. Honestly, it's called CRISPR-Cas9. Maybe that's a whole nother podcast about. And actually, this whole COVID. The vaccine is based on that technology. The concept of that's the brilliance with this vaccine is not the vaccine itself. It's the fact that we, in the same way we program a website, we programmed this bacteria or whatever to infiltrate our body in a certain way.
Be careful about programming
you think
bacteria.
about DNA and
What does
new
that
vaccines
mean?
that are dealing
What's
with
that?
stuff. Look, I'm not a medical person, but I just can envision this technology can be used for a lot of really wonderful things. And that's why I think as Christians, I don't think our knee-jerk reaction should ever be just anti-advancement. I think we embrace it, but we tame it. And I think the moment it starts to simulate what only can be done by the real and living God, and as reorganizing and redeeming a real and living world that is both biomaterial and spiritual. We'll see.
Should we toast?
Yeah. Cheers, guys. Thank you for a wonderful conversation.
What are we toasting to?
Wow, that went so fast.
To the
I
real
don't even know
world.
what happened. I thought it was 5 minutes ago.
Toast into the real world.
To the real world.
Well,
Whatever
still here.
Whatever
just a
that is.
disclaimer. For those who are watching, I knew nothing about what I was talking about this whole time.
You know what the fact is? None of us really do. It has
Don't
been.
take anything I said.
Cheers.
What did we cheer to?
The real world.
The real world.
The real world.
The real
okay.
world.
Whatever
Real world.
it is.
The Imago Dei.
Right.
Annie, do you want to say the thing?
Oh yeah. Share with your friends. Send it to somebody. Now you know what to say. We're in your conversation about the metaverse. And leave us a comment. We especially want to know what you want to know. Tell us what kind of questions you have. What do you want us to talk about? What do you want these two tools to talk with somebody else about? Also, the subscription seems to be very important for the robots, I hear Alex say every week. And other than that, we hope to hear from you soon. Until next time.
Thank you, Annie, for being
Thank
here.
you, Annie, for having us.
And the voice of Smokin Theologians is with us.
Yes, you
In a full